Hey everybody, this is the show where we are incredibly inspired by the love and change that local nonprofits bring to their communities. And we believe that speakers and nonprofit professionals deserve the chance to share their stories, collaborate, and network with their communities and sector. So without further ado, you're listening to Nonprofit Connect, a podcast by Rogue Creatives hosted by me, Matt Barnes. Let's go. This has been a Rogue Creatives production. Well, Maria Rio is here, and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. I'm excited to be here and chatting and hopefully get as much insight from you as you get from me.
Oh, man. No, we're here to learn from you. But before we jump in, we always start with a segment we call 3 random questions. We have a very long list of random questions, and we randomly choose 3 of them. So are you ready for these?
I'm excited.
Okay.
Born ready.
Good. If they made a movie about your life, who would play you?
Nicole Kidman.
All right. So Nicole Kidman, are you like 6 foot? Is that the thing?
Yeah, and famous.
Oh, there you go.
So,
Sure. And Australian.
Yeah, it adds
all
up.
the things.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah. Question 2. What is your favorite cuisine? Like Italian or Mexican, or what do you like?
Mexican by far. My second would be Portuguese, but I'm Mexican and we just have the best food.
There you go. What is Portuguese food? What is specific about that?
Oh my goodness. They have a caldo verde, which is like, this is not going to sound very enticing, but it's delicious. It's a spinach and potato blended soup. Then they have rotisserie chicken and this like specific rice and all their baked goods, like the custard pastéis de nata.
Mhm.
So good.
All right.
Seafood.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, I've been to Portugal, but I've never like seen a Portuguese restaurant around or any, so I'm gonna look for one now. Are they
Yes, Toronto
plentiful
has
in
a lot of
Canada?
different cultural.
Yeah.
Yes, they really are. There's a
Oh.
huge Portuguese community here.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Last question. In an alternate universe, what would you be doing?
I don't know why the first thing that came to mind was like leading a group of explorers.
Ooh.
I don't know. That doesn't sound very restful though. I would like something more restful, but that was the
Well,
first thing that came to mind. Yeah.
you want laying on a beach, but what you're going with is exploring.
Yeah, exploring, doing cool stuff and reporting to no one.
Nice. I like that. Reporting to no one. That's the
Yeah.
important part there, right? Well,
Yeah.
you don't report to anyone though. You run your own business, right?
That's right. Currently I do, which is very exciting, but I still feel a lot of accountability to the
Of course.
communities that I try to represent and my clients. But ideally, if I'm exploring the universe, it'll be a little bit more rogue.
All right. Well, tell us about yourself. Tell us your origin story. Where'd you come from and how'd you get to what you're doing now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Maria. My pronouns are she and her, and I come to this work through a professional lens. So I am someone who has accessed services in the past, and just a little bit more context there. I came to Canada as a refugee when I was 9 years old. I lived in a World Vision refugee shelter with my mom and my sibling for 6 months.
Wow.
And then my mom's education didn't really transfer over from, Mexico. Apparently, Canada's too good for Mexican education. So my mom was picking up like babysitting shifts and just trying to make ends meet. But in that time, like it's one mom, 2 kids, it was very difficult for her. So we would access food banks, we would do like drop-in meals before school, we would have, Santa Claus gifts by strangers, the whole gamut, and
Yeah.
when I was old enough to fundraise, I saw these people fundraising on the street with the World Vision vest, and I was super excited. I'm like, oh, I want to do that, which I feel it's not something many people think when they see face-to-face canvassers. But I was really excited about it. I wanted to be the person that could tell people about the impact that they were actually funding. I thought that
Mm.
was a very unique angle, my 19-year-old self, right?
Yeah.
And now I've been fundraising for over a decade. So I have plenty of experience when it comes to a bunch of different organizations. But over the past year and 4 months, I have been running my own consultancy.
I love
So
it.
I did that because I kind of wanted to get away from the nonprofit industrial complex just a little bit, just a tiny bit. And it's been really good. It's been the opportunity to choose the people who I work with, the clients who are value aligned and just pushing the things I care about forward.
Well, I love this because I think, I talk to a lot of people who run nonprofits, work in the nonprofit space, and, fundraising is always sort of the like thorn in the side. It's the hard one. You got to find somebody who actually seems to maybe like doing it, which a lot of people don't. Asking for money is not something people tend to enjoy. And we're kind of culturally not comfortable with that. But to have somebody who has leaned into that aspect of it and is helping other people. Now you're not running a nonprofit, you're a for-profit that's doing consultancy with nonprofits, right?
That's correct.
And it's called Further Together, and you're in Toronto. Do you work with clients mostly in Toronto or worldwide, or?
I work with clients mostly in Canada and the States because I feel like
Okay.
I understand the issues the most. So,
Sure.
but I do have people reach out to me from like Uganda or Nigeria, and they're like, "Hey, you want to help me set up my nonprofit?" And I'm like, "I have not the first clue of how it would be helpful to you." But when it comes to Canadian, the landscape is just so familiar at this point, and American, like I've been learning a lot more.
Yeah.
There are some barriers to that though, because in the States, each state you have to register as a fundraiser, which is completely different than here. Here, we don't have to do anything like that. So there are some small changes that you adjust as you learn and meet different clients.
Yeah.
But it's been really great.
That's awesome. So what are the biggest, I mean, you work with probably, I'm imagining, a wide variety of nonprofits in different spaces. What are consistent challenges that you're seeing, and how are you sort of addressing some of those?
So one of them is executive directors feel very lonely. They don't
Yeah.
have anyone to kind of like share a brain with, strategize with. They feel like the board doesn't 100% understand what they're going through, which most of the time they don't. And they feel like they can't be open with our staff. So I feel like a lot of executive directors don't have anyone to kind of turn to in that scenario. So something that I've been doing is trying to be that person for them and trying to connect them to other people who either work in a similar kind of sector. So if you run a festival, I know someone else who runs a festival. So why don't you two connect? Or a
Yeah.
queer organization, another queer organization, why don't you two kind of chat and trying to make sure that people have some sort of moral support.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a colleague, Mike Prosserman, who runs this really cool cohort-based thing that's only for executive directors that are looking to kind of maybe transition from their role or kind of decide what is actually making them happy. So he runs something called Epic Leadership, and they help you decide, like, is this something that still fits into your life? If yes, then great. Why don't we talk to your board about the things that really matter to you? And if not, then okay, maybe it's time to transition. And how do you do that in a way that is thinking of the organization's best interests as well as yours?
Yeah.
So that's definitely one big trend that I'm seeing. The other one is more fundraising specific. Organizations have very little time or understanding of how to grow their lists. So we're seeing a lot of scarcity mindset around like donor attrition, and
Yep.
people are making smaller gifts and people are not giving as much or not giving their time as much either. So it's very difficult to engage. But they don't have a plan of how to actually grow their email list. They don't have a plan of, okay, now that I brought someone to the event, now what? So I have seen that that is kind of a growing barrier for a lot of nonprofits, like not
Yeah.
having that plan. And then the third one is not having the time to plan.
Right.
So everybody's run off their feet, which is typical nonprofit life. But I don't know. I just wish that people would take the time to like shut down their operations for one day every year to work collaboratively with their staff to actually say, like, okay, what are the things that are working? What are the things that are not working? And
Yeah.
there's like this like martyrdom in nonprofit of like,
Sure.
no, I can never shut down for one day. But it's a small thing that is the long-term sustainability of your organization.
I've worked with a lot of startup type nonprofits, and setting those foundations early can make a huge difference of the strategies and setting the goals so that you can hire correctly and kind of plan accordingly. But so many don't. So many kind of get into it. The one of the challenges I see is so many people, they see a need and they go, "Oh, I'm going to start a nonprofit," and they don't really think that through. And I'm always telling people, start a nonprofit that's harder than a business. This is this is not, I mean, you're doing your thing, but then you also have to do fundraising, and you also have to all the compliance stuff and all that. There's a lot there. Starting a nonprofit is not just a like, oh yeah, I'll just do that. Because there's a lot more to
Yes.
it.
And something that I find interesting is because I've been in my business, my for-profit business over the
Mhm.
past year, like I've been able to see some of the mistakes that nonprofits make while they're trying to scale and grow. Because now I'm fully responsible for scaling and growing my own business.
Sure.
So how do I do that without an accountant,
Right. Right.
or without someone who is reviewing an employment agreement? Like you cannot do it alone.
Yeah.
So just having those things in place before you look to expand the program or before you look to do this whole new initiative or fundraising event, like having these pieces together first, I think is so important, but it's the step that usually comes after you've already envisioned and started actually the program. For example, you don't have the financials for the next 2 years planned out.
You talk a lot about community-centric fundraising. What does that mean? What does that look like? And, how have you been leading nonprofits toward that?
Yeah, so community-centric fundraising is exactly what it sounds like. You send to the community, but if you're not very familiar with fundraising, that might not be something that you feel is not already being done.
Yeah.
So usually nonprofits have fundraising in a way that really centers the donor, so not the community. They cater to the donor in as many ways as possible by naming buildings after them, giving them tours of shelters, feeding them fancy meals, sending them flowers and Christmas gifts, like just really making sure that the donor feels kind of like a celebrity, I guess.
Yeah.
Not, I wouldn't even say like a hero because they're not deeply involved in the understanding of the systemic issues and that kind of stuff, but definitely like a celebrity, like really,
Yeah.
really special and catered to, which personally, I feel like the donors that I have been thankfully working with don't want that.
Yeah.
They're actually looking for a real partnership and they want to be more involved in solving the issue. So they want to be considered more than just a bank or
Yeah.
a supporter without actually being a partner. So that's something that I found very nice when I've been doing community-centric fundraising. And I actually started my community-centric fundraising journey while I was working at a $5 million organization, which provided emergency food access services. So this organization did a lot of their fundraising through events, and
Yeah.
some of them were really fancy events like a gala.
Sure.
And for me, with my lived experience, I was saying, hey, like a ticket price of like $300 is a lot. Like I
Yeah.
would never, when I was food insecure, would never even consider that as something that's a viable option. So this event by design is not accessible to our service users. And it makes it kind of elitist, which when I started talking to donors, they had also been thinking that as well. They're
Mm.
like, why am I enjoying this like really fancy, expensive, the chef made it right in front of me meal
Sure.
when no, like when this is for a food bank, like that doesn't, there's kind of like a dissonance there. So
Sure.
I'm not saying don't do galas. They may be totally appropriate for your specific community. But for this one, there was a dissonance that was actually already being caught on to by the donors.
Yeah.
So we moved away from events. We moved towards more of a partnership model where we engage them every step of the way. And when we really looked at what our community members were looking for when it came to policy changes, we were able to bring those to the donor to more deeply inform them and deepen that relationship in a way that was less transactional than events. So there's a lot of ways to implement it, and not each of the 10 principles will apply the same way to each organization because you each have a different community.
Yeah.
So it's a really interesting approach to it and something that I've really enjoyed, especially with my clients and with when I've done speaking or anything like that, working through some of the things that are not community centric.
Yeah.
So another example, like it's not super community centric to go to an organization and be like, hey, can you find me this like racialized kid to hold the check and smile?
Right.
Because obviously that person is a person that you're portraying in some sort of way. They have feelings. They don't like being used as a prop.
Right.
But if your organization is all about supporting animals and you have a dog do that, the dog's not going to care. There's no
Right.
like preconceived notions about dogs that are, needing vet bills paid or covered for. So there's those kind of like considerations that you need to have
Sure.
when you are measuring what is the right community-centric fundraising approach for your organization.
Right. Well, yeah. And we work with a lot of nonprofits doing marketing and storytelling and really trying to change that tide toward ethical storytelling and not exploiting and giving that power back to the clients. and it's challenging because people are like, well, no, but this is what we expect. We expect the sob story or whatever, which aside from the ethics, I mean, that should be enough. But just think about logically, people know that the world sucks. Like if we're just hitting them over the head with that over and over again, you're just reminding them of the problem. What we want to catch people in is the solution, like the excitement of what's happening, and that gets people to come along for the ride and like actually join. And so I think what you're saying and is interesting to me is even taking that a step further into how we do our events, how we do our fundraising, and really like how do we catch people into this thing. But also, I mean, and just honestly, like when you said that about the $300 ticket for the gala, I've been to plenty of those, and I've never once thought about the people that are being served wouldn't be able to come to this. But you're right. And why not? Like if part of the goal is to show the humanity and break down the barriers between the haves and the have-nots, then is that really helping?
It's like it's building community, but for who? Like, who are you purposely excluding, and how does that align with what you're here to do?
That's so interesting. I love this.
Mm.
One of my favorite things doing this podcast has been just the challenging ways that some of the different guests have brought different perspectives for me and for our listeners. And I will say that most of the most challenging ones have come from Canada. I don't know what that's all about. You guys up there are doing something right.
We're trying our best. Oh,
Yeah.
but I wanted to go to something with the storytelling because
Yeah.
most of the time you see small nonprofits try to mimic what big nonprofits are doing. So
Yes.
like 20, 30 years ago, World Vision, Plan, like they were all doing the whole, look at this poor child that is actually in crisis. Like, look at them. You
Yeah.
should
Yeah.
donate. Like really pulling on the guilt and really hoping people would give. And we know people give, which is great. So you got the gift. Congrats. But actually, that donor will not stay around for as long as if you had empowered them. So
Exactly.
that's why now you see these huge organizations that share their story in a completely different way than they did 20, 30 years ago, because that's what works. So now we have like better research on what is working.
Yeah.
And it's not about telling a sob story. It's about showing the impact. Like
Yes.
my donation will result in this child going to school and the kid is smiling and the kid is healthy. Like it's not just
Yes.
look how horrible it is. Because also doesn't that make you question the ethics of a nonprofit that's willing to film a kid in crisis?
Right.
But actually, if you empower them to make a donation, they're going to stick around for much longer than if you guilt them into it, which is something that's so interesting. But I feel like smaller nonprofits haven't adapted to yet.
Yeah, no, that's definitely it's one of the first things when I meet with a new client that I say is, if you lead with the sob story, which is ethics aside, you might get a one-time, $20 to make my guilt feel better so I can leave and feel okay about it, instead
Yes.
of catching them into the story of what you're doing where they want to be a part of it and really see how their investment in what you're doing, turns out and the outcome of that, and then you get a cycle of reinvestment there too. It's logically more sound, and it also happens to be ethically more sound, and it just kind of works out that way, which is doesn't always happen in life. Sometimes the things you know that are good for you aren't always the best tasting. So, but in this case it's like, no, this is a win-win. Let's take it.
Yeah. And it's such an easy way to start applying like your own values to your fundraising communications work. So like if your board is a barrier to something like a gala and having to change that and it's not community centric for your organization, there's so many other ways that you can apply your own values to your work. So making sure that a community member would not be completely distraught, like seeing their image or their story being told in that way is
Right.
one very powerful thing to do.
You mentioned something about 8 or 10 pillars. Was that really,
Yes,
what
yes.
was that? What's that from?
So community-centric fundraising was founded by a group of fundraisers in Seattle and
Okay.
Relay, who we all know. But they came up with a group of 10 principles and they kind of guide the parameters of CCF. So, for example, fundraising must be grounded in race, equity, and social justice. Or individual organizational missions are not as important as the collective community. Nonprofits are generous with and mutually supportive of one another. All who engage in strengthening the community are equally valued, whether volunteer, staff, donor, or board member. So there's 6
I
others. I
love
won't,
that.
I won't bore
Yeah,
you with
yeah.
the full list. You might already know it. But each one can be applied in a different manner depending on your community and the kind of people that you have available. So, for
Sure.
example, all who engage in strengthening the community are equally valued, whether volunteer, staff, donor, or board member. How are you stewarding your volunteers? Are
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
You should be. You're
Yeah.
donating so much time.
Yeah.
And same thing with your staff. Like, are you treating your staff well? Because why are you saying that you value, human dignity and a good quality of life and X, Y, and Z while also terrifying and terrorizing your staff every single day?
And it's
So really applying it to all aspects.
and to be fair to the nonprofits that are struggling with some of this stuff, there are such cultural issues and expectations on nonprofits that they have to fight against if they want to really effectively make those changes. We just did a screening here at one of our live gatherings of Uncharitable, which I don't know if you've seen the documentary. It's
Of course, of
fantastic. Yeah.
course. Yes.
Well, I'm surprised how many people I bring it up with, and they're like, "I've never heard of this. What is this?
What?
Yeah, a lot, a lot, a lot." And, obviously there's just a lot out there up against nonprofits actually being successful in solving the problems of the world. But again, this is where I caution people who are going into the nonprofit space of like, this is know what you're going into. If you're going to go into this, you've got to be going in going, I know I'm up against these things and I'm going to fight against it, and I'm going to, and if you can't, then don't do it, because you will burn people out. You will exploit people. You will all those things and end up miserable and actually probably doing more harm than good in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, it's so rough. I just want our sector to be better. And I understand there's a lot of challenges towards that. It's just, for me, I feel like those challenges are by design, right?
Yeah.
So part of the nonprofit industrial complex is all about like, don't bite the hand that feeds you, don't upset that donor.
Right.
And you depend on the people who might be causing these issues to donate to you. So it's very complicated morally, especially when you come into the sector with such a strong passion for what's going on, and for me, like lived experience to then like be
Yeah.
faced with those challenges. But I think it all comes back to values. So your individual values and also the collective values of your organization. So
Yeah.
what do you believe in, and how do you live that and operationalize that every single day? It's not
Absolutely.
perfect, but
I've told some of these stories on here before, I think, but last year we went through a complete rebrand and renaming of a nonprofit. Took them through the whole process and spent months on it. And one of not one of their biggest donor found out about it and said, if you change the name of the organization, I'm pulling my funding. And so we had to scrap everything because they said we won't exist if this person leaves. And I just was like, oh, come on. Like, and we've had, I mean, that was the most extreme, but we've had these things happen where the whole, staff of an organization, yeah, this is what we got to do. And then the board goes, no, we don't want to change those things. This is how we've always done it. We're just going to keep doing it that way. And you're going like, these are the people out there doing the work. And they're saying we can help more people if we make these changes.
yeah.
And you're saying no, because you don't want to, change the colors in your logo, or you don't want to, do a different type of video or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Make a more accessible website or whatever. And it's so infuriating that it's set up this way in so many instances.
That's why, like, for me, like, community-centric fundraising is such an interesting tool, because staff, like program staff, don't have the same kind of leverage on boards that fundraisers do.
Yeah.
And like, I hate to say it that way because they're very important and they're often seen as expendable. But
Yeah.
a fundraiser, you know that you're not going to find a good fundraiser. It's going to take you like 6 months to a year to find your next DOD. You know that.
Yeah.
So what are you going to do? You're going to fire me for saying I believe in equity? You
Right.
know, you're going to get upset because I'm talking to a donor about systemic issues that impact our community members. So I think there's a lot of power that fundraisers have that they can actually leverage to push their organization in the right direction. So like, hey, this strategic plan, it should include our program staff. Like we shouldn't
Yeah.
just have it be board members and the managers. It should include everyone. Or
Yeah.
hey, we have this $200,000 grant. I'm going to tie it to this initiative that is all about DEI work in our organization. So now we have to spend $200,000 doing that.
Yeah.
Right.
One of the
So you have the ability to kind of hold the purse strings.
Absolutely. I'm curious to get your opinion on this. One of the things that I've been sharing a lot lately with our clients and with just people at the Nonprofit Connect events is the idea of, for so long we've talked about you're investing in the life of a child, you're investing in the life of And instead, really, they're not. They're investing in you to go and solve a problem. And I actually think that's more compelling. And the story, but a lot of people are very hesitant to that because they don't want to make it about themselves. If we are to address some of the issues in uncharitable and that are happening, setting the nonprofits up as experts out in the world solving problems. And when you're investing your fund, you're investing in them to go and solve these problems, also frees them. It changes the whole mindset of it and the way that the story's told. And it doesn't have to be about, a lack of humility or egocentrism or any of that kind of stuff. It really, it's the same way you would any business, any company, anybody who's out there trying to solve a problem. Like, you invest in it because you want to see them go and solve that. And that's what nonprofits need to be empowered to do, to make the decisions, to figure it out, to screw up, to make mistakes and try things that don't work and learn from that and do better, and that's that. But a lot of people are resistant to that. What do you think about that kind of messaging?
I've actually thought about this a lot recently. And I am of the mind that nonprofits want to both be corporate and
Yeah.
a grassroots movement. And they're
Yeah.
doing neither, right? You have to kind of like really buy into one of those, right? So if it's going to be grassroots and you're not petitioning, protesting, like speaking out against like whatever is affecting your community members, like
Sure.
whether that's like corporations or whatever.
Yeah.
But you risk funding, right? You risk all these other things, but you're running as a very values aligned organization or group of people, peer support. But on the other hand, like if you're going to run corporate, which we like to say that we don't, but we also like to adapt as many of those things as possible,
Right.
then your HR needs to work. You got to be able to get rid of toxic board members, toxic leaders. You've got to be able to measure the impact of an initiative, which why do you not do that for your programs or your fundraising, and make decisions based on data, right? Which right now we don't really do as a sector. So we're trying to do the corporate thing and the grassroots thing, and those don't go together. You really have to pick a lane, and either lane might be completely fine based on your community and what you're seeking to achieve, but you can't stay kind of lukewarm about it.
Yeah, I love that. Just to kind of wrap things up, if there's one piece of advice you could give to nonprofits out there right now who are struggling with all of these things, what would it be?
My first piece of advice would be to really try to gauge what your organizational values are. So there's a lot of really interesting exercises that you can do to do this. So maybe get a list of 20. Oops, I just hit my mic. Sorry.
I didn't even hear.
Maybe get a list of 20 values and then start crossing them off until you have your top 3. So like, do you value like health and wellness more than you value equity? Like, and why is that? So really having to choose, like, how are you going to run the organization when push comes to shove, right? So that's one way to do it. And another one I learned in CBT in therapy is called the hot thought exercise. So where you have like a thought that you are really attached to. So like, we have to have a gala this year. Question it. Like, why is that? Because if we don't, people won't donate. Why do you think that? Because we haven't engaged them in another way. Yeah. Because they don't care about us, right?
Yeah.
So like really chasing down those core beliefs using that hot thought exercise that I just quickly went over.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then seeing like, is this what I want the core belief of my organization to reflect? Right. So it's a little bit of a backwards exercise.
Yeah, but you're getting to the root of what you believe, and not the symptom. So the symptom is we have to have a gala because we've always had a gala, but okay, why? And then you go back to that. In therapy, it's like, yeah, that makes sense, but organizationally, people don't stop to do that and think about that. What is the why behind your thing? And it's often much deeper than you think it is.
Yeah, and it could be like because it raises millions of dollars, and okay, great. So like, why is that important to us? Right? So there's like all these like deeper layers of the things that we do day to day that we never really consider. And I think the first thing that you need to do to kind of decide whether you're going to be more corporate, be more CCF, be more grassroots, get rid of this leader or hire this person, like all of that is values based. And if you don't know what your values are, then how are you going to make any of these decisions?
Yeah, I love it. So good. All right, we close with a few questions to kind of wrap things up. You have a podcast, and so I'm going to tweak this one a little bit. Normally I ask, who do you think we should have on our podcast next? Who have you had on your podcast that you think I should have on this podcast as well?
Oh man, there's so many lovely people that I've had on my podcast. Okay, so I already talked about Mike Prosserman. He was one of the first people that I interviewed for my podcast. Amazing person. Michelle Okur, she is someone based out of Alberta who works with DEI, with organizations looking to improve their DEI efforts. And Madeline from Out on Screen has been working on really interesting fundraising stuff there. So I just released an episode with her on this fundraising for a last show that they did with QR codes that said "Scan me, Daddy." So it's just really different and really exciting. Yeah, right. It was perfect. But yes, those are three people who I've really enjoyed talking to, and I think you would love them as well.
Awesome. And what's the name of your podcast so that everybody can go check that out as well?
It's a small nonprofit.
Nice. Yeah, obviously listen to this first and then go listen to her podcast. But who inspires you most in the nonprofit world? Who would you want to take to lunch?
I'm so lucky that the people that inspire me, I'm actually able to connect with relatively often. But there's two people who I really, really always look up to. One of them is Cindy Wegman, of course, who is amazing. She started the Fractional Fundraising Academy. She actually was a person who helped me start my business, which I'm so thankful for because there's so many issues that this has helped me kind of address. And the other one is Lacey from Balance Good. So Lacey started her business based on the idea that parents should be treated as people. So for people who are, becoming pregnant and what is my role going to look like? Do I have a job on the way back? Like, is this person going to completely screw up my role in the next 6 to 18 months? Canada, we have a little bit longer here. So both of them, I think, are so innovative and such superstars running their own businesses in a way that is very inclusive and so smart. So those are my two favorite people right now.
And finally, what brings you the most joy in what you do?
There's so many things that bring me joy about being a fundraiser. One of the things is getting to build really deep relationships with people and actually have these interesting conversations. Because at the beginning, when I started Major Gifts fundraising, it was actually terrifying.
Of course.
But now that I see it as a partnership, now that I view it as me and you are working together instead of me versus you, I have to get your money somehow.
Yeah.
Now that I see it that way, I've been able to really engage with people on topics like their family's wealth and how they view it and, planned giving, how they view their own life and death. It's just such deep conversations that you don't usually get to have with people who are kind of strangers, right? You don't get to just jump in and build a really deep relationship with people that you work with in a lot of ways. So I have found that very rewarding and seeing people's mind change and light up when they actually have the verbiage to say oh, that's why I felt gross about that, So that has been really nice.
Awesome. Well, Maria, thank you so much for being here. It does not surprise me that you say that so many things bring you joy because you are clearly a person who radiates joy. You just seem like you just are really loving everything you're doing. And I love the passion that you have for it. Let the listeners know where they can find you and find more info because they all need to go hire you.
Thank you so much. Okay. So I'm the host of the Small Nonprofit. So if you want to keep listening to my voice forever and ever, you can find me there. If you would like to connect on LinkedIn, Maria Rio, RIO, it'll be in the show notes, I assume.
Yep.
And and my company is Further Together Fundraising. So you can go on Go Further Together and connect with me there as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. You've given me much to think about as I continue to work with nonprofits. And I'm sure that the same is true for our listeners.
Thank you so much for having me.
And my friends, that is a wrap for today. If you made it this far, and I don't know why you wouldn't, it's pretty awesome. Thank you so much for listening to Nonprofit Connect. We cannot tell you how much we appreciate it because we really appreciate it a lot. And it's hard to say that really well. We really would like it though if you came back for our next episode. Only if you liked it, obviously. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you use and visit our website, npconnect.roguecreatives.com. Hopefully we've managed to share insights to make you feel connected and even a smidge better about your life and the world and everything. Are our goals too high? Maybe. But that's how we like things. All right. You have yourself a great day. Bye-bye. Nonprofit Connect with Matt Barnes is hosted and executive produced by me, Matt Barnes, with an assist by my chaos coordinator, Tiffany Pope. Production is by our amazing friends over at Fame, the B2B podcast agency, along with Belinda Carter-Thompson and the team here at Rogue Creatives. Production lead is Luke Audi at Fame. Writing is by Sam Hollis at Fame and Matt Barnes and Taylor Bolanos from Rogue Creatives. Nemanja Koljaja of Fame is our audio editor, and Arslan Yakub from Fame is our video editor. Creative direction is by Corey Hill of Rogue. Our artwork is designed by Hopo Kelly and Joshua Marino at Rogue, and Ian Salas of Fame. Theme music is composed and performed by Jared Atherton of Chapters. Luke Audi of Fame does our booking and our guest relations. Huge thanks to our amazing guest for joining us for this episode, and to all of you incredible listeners for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, and I don't know why you wouldn't have, don't forget to help us spread some good by giving us a good review. Preferably, 5 stars with lots of words saying how amazing we are on whatever platform you're listening on. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever it is. Also, tell your friends and subscribe so we can come straight into your potholes each and every time we have a new episode. For more information about Nonprofit Connect, or to join us at a live event here in Orange County, California, visit our website, npconnect.roguecreatives.com. We'll catch you next time. This has been a Rogue Creatives production.